Hello, everybody, and welcome back to The Tome Travelers. This is episode 6.
Yeah.
Yeah, we made it episode 6. We are going to be discussing Warbreaker chapters 27 to the end, and also having our full book discussion and give our final thoughts on the book. So I'm
Book
excited to
two
start.
down.
Yeah, it's 2 books down. So there will be a spoiler warning for Warbreaker, obviously, because we're going to be talking about all of that. And then also, like we've done the past 2 episodes, they will be a Cosmere Connections at the end of the episode. We'll give you a warning before we do. But that will have tons of Cosmere spoilers. So if this is your first Cosmere book, you want to click away, go for it. Please click away. We want you to not get spoiled. But before we get into all of this discussing, we have a fantasy question. Whitson, what is it?
Who is your favorite fantasy book villain?
All right.
So this is a daunting one.
This is daunting.
You wanna take it first, MD?
Yeah, I'll go first. So my favorite fantasy book villain, and there's probably some recency bias here, but I don't care, is I'm going to say Odium.
Yeah, I knew it.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
He's so good, and the build up to him is one of the best build ups of all time. And then you finally get to see him and just all this stuff. It's just what is happening?
So Man,
passions.
But passion. Hey, and he's not done yet. He's still got a lot of books to go.
I know.
He can only get better from here.
Yeah, I'm so excited. So mine's Odium.
Okay. Do you have yours yet, Dylan? You still thinking?
Yeah. No,
Okay.
So every time we ask these questions, we start doing these, I go blank. But this one popped in my head, and it's the Jackal from Red Rising, and it's just because he's cunning, and at one point he does something that just completely steps him up, in my opinion, and so that's why I picked him.
Okay.
Nice. I haven't read Red Rising, but I want to. So.
Yeah, I haven't either, but it's on the to be read. Okay, well, for mine, I went with the Chandrian from Name of the Wind because they're so mysterious, and you literally you get the vibe that they could just drop from the sky and slaughter everyone at any moment, and it's so terrifying.
Two huge books, and we know 3 things about them.
Yeah.
And one of the things is that the more you say their name, the more likely they are to show up and kill you.
Yeah.
That's kind of
it's insane. So yeah, that's my favorite.
Awesome.
I would say a specific one of them, but then you get into spoiler territory. So.
Oh yeah, there you go. Well, with our question, let's go ahead and jump into episode 6 of The Tome Travelers. All right, so Whitson, do you have the synopsis for us this episode?
Yeah. Okay, so I can't say that I remember specifically which chapter we came back in on, but I think where we came back in, Ciri and Sisebron were starting to get close. She had kind of figured out his secret and why they didn't want her to touch him or talk to him. She gets really interested in learning about the history of Hallandren to figure out why they would do this, what their motivations were with the God King. Let's see. Hoyd comes and tells her about the history of Hallandren and Peacemaker and Kalad's phantoms and all of the mini war. Blushweaver gets the lifeless commands for half of the army. Vivenna gets captured by Vasher because he thinks that she's involved in Denth's ploy, and then she escapes from Vasher and figures out that Denth and Tonkfa are betraying her, and they never had her best interest in mind. She was kind of a tool for them, and she runs away from all of them and spends weeks as an urchin. Lightsong keeps investigating the murders and looking into his past life, or trying to figure out who he was. And then everything comes to a head when the Punkal kill Blushweaver after taking her lifeless commands and Lightsong's, and they sick them on the Idrians, trying to start another giant war where they can quietly usurp the Hallandrons. And then we finally learn who Vasher is.
Yeah. Lots of fun stuff happened this episode for sure.
Oh yeah, I think so. Like we talked about last episode, how honestly the book was kind of slow for me, but like I feel like it all like really came together and like really got exciting towards the end of this, and it made me like it. Like this second half made me like the book so much more.
Yeah, Sanderson is known for his Sanderlanches.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that kind of answers my question. I was going to ask, did you like the first half of the book better or the second half?
Second half, 100%.
Yeah, the second half was way better. Way better.
Yeah.
So many of the things that like we were complaining about last episode got addressed.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Always makes me happy.
Yeah.
Pretty much. And all the questions that you had, you're like, wait, what's this?
Well,
oh.
okay, so we'll
Not
get
all
into
the
it.
questions.
Yeah,
but-
we'll get into it in Cosmere collection or connections.
Oh,
but
yeah,
not
yeah.
not all the questions.
right. But yeah, so let's go ahead and start talking about some of our characters. Then we could start, I guess, with Ciri and Susabron.
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 Man, he's got game for a no tongue guy,
Hey,
doesn't he?
yeah. I remember reading the book, and this is my second read through the book. But I sent Dylan a message, and I said I forgot how much Riz Susabron has. One of the quotes that he says is, "There's nothing so wonderful as you, even in my entire court. The mountains must be special indeed to produce such beauty." And it's like, homie's got game. Like,
Yeah, that's what like when I was reading through, like right above that quote, he says something like, "I think the prettiest thing in the mountains done came down and saw me." I was like, "Oh, okay, okay."
Yeah, he was pretty smooth with that one.
Yeah, he's an exact contrast to who we thought he was at the beginning of this book. There's just this
Oh yeah,
horrifying, like,
Yeah.
don't touch him, don't look at him, don't speak to him, you know?
Yeah, and then
Sometimes-
another one of my favorite things is like when every time he goes to do like the nervous like arm over her shoulder thing, I picture like that move you do in the movies when you yawn.
Yeah.
And you know, awkwardly put your arm around the girl's shoulder.
Yeah.
I just picture him doing that and like looking over and seeing what she's thinking about it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But hey,
literally
she-
acting like a 16-year-old.
Yeah, but she seems to like it, which I mean, what's
Right.
what's to hate about, you know, a Greek god? I mean,
Right. Well, at
Literally.
first, you know, she like kind of just starts to feel bad for him, like, oh no, he has no tongue. This is why he's
Yeah.
the way he is. But then, in the process of like teaching him how to read and like talking to him every single night, they actually fall in love, and she stops making the noises fakely, and
yeah.
they actually,
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
let's get it on.
Yeah.
there's something to be said about a 50-year-old and a 17-year-old still, I think, but
Well,
like
Oh,
a
yeah.
It's still a little-
70-year-old or so.
Still a little awkward, but
Oh no, but
If,
you know,
if it's love, it's love. You know.
give her one more year.
Yeah.
that's a little sketch, but it's fantasy world, whatever.
right.
So, I want to talk about like how smart Siri is. She basically figures all their plans out before they happen. Like she does a really good job of figuring stuff out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, she still has it backwards, but like she's done a better job on the inside as the like dumb little sister than Vivenna did on the outside,
Yeah.
like paying mercenaries
Yeah.
and attacking people and stuff.
That's true. Siri
But like she still figures it out. Like she did have it kind of backwards, but she still figured out it right before Bluefingers, you know, got away with it.
Oh, true. Yeah. Right at the last moment, she does
Yeah.
kind of like
Yeah.
put her finger on it.
which
Yeah.
that's one of my like things about this book, but we'll get into that at the end of the book. But
Yeah. Well, so we kind of predicted that in episode 1, where we were like, you know, maybe Ciri would do better in the court than Vivenna would.
Yeah, I
Right.
said she would like grow into herself, which we see that at the end of the book too. Vivenna like looks at Ciri and is like, holy, you know, she looks like a queen right now. Like she's controlling her hair and all this other stuff. Like she's got that manner. Like they basically switch places.
yeah.
Yep. And then Vivenna goes out on the road to be an adventurer because she doesn't want to be bored and tied down.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like they really
Just
legitimately
exact
just
flip.
swapped personalities by the end of the book.
Yeah. And then like
I mean,
Okay.
if you think about
no,
it,
go finish that because I was gonna switch.
Well, I was going to say they more like met in the middle, I guess. Like
Yeah.
they didn't really swap necessarily, but Ciri is like so much more in control of herself, and Vivenna is like has realized a lot of the like aesthetics of like her pious life before were like ultimately not serving her.
Right.
And
Yeah.
it's just cool to see them like meet in the middle and like both be kind of healthier, cooler characters.
Yeah, one of my favorite things was like, cause I was telling y'all I listened to it twice and then read through it. I caught so much shit that like at the time didn't seem important or like is funny because of how it happened. So like one of the things with Siri was when she like stumbles, she gets Bluefingers to come talk to her when she's in the baths again. But like she like stumbled into it by talking about his plan, and then their whole conversation in the bath is like he thinks she knows what he's gonna do, and like he's like blown away and confused that she knows all this. And it was just funny reading it the second time because of his demeanor. You realize why he's acting like that.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah, I didn't think back to that in that moment. That's cool though.
Yeah, I felt like Sanderson did that through a lot of this book. Like there was like stuff in the background, like when Siri's listening to the storyteller, it there's like a two sentences where he's like talking about how they're gonna send more troops into the slums, and then it's just like little shit that throughout the book that lets you know like what ends up happening as far as the uh
It's
like
like foreshadowed well,
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's all
basically.
Yeah.
foreshadowed really well. Whereas if
Uh,
like you're paying really close attention, like you get to the end and it's like, oh my God, this all makes sense now. This all ties in of why this stuff's going on.
yeah, because the whole time I was really confused about like you know when you read a story and you're like, okay, but the conflict doesn't make sense. Like, yeah, these characters are cool. Yeah, like that's funny, but the conflict doesn't make sense. Like this is just a communication gap. Like this shouldn't be happening. That was the vibe I was getting from this book right up until the end, where I'm like, oh, I was completely wrong. Like I
Yeah.
was
Yeah,
completely
yeah,
wrong about all of this.
yeah. And I'm usually really good at like picking, like usually that's my thing in books is like I pick out little shit like that.
Yeah.
And like I felt like this, but like so like one of the biggest things, which we'll get into in Vivenna when we talk about Vivenna, is I did not see Death betraying her. And like normally, like I'm the guy that's like, hey, he's gonna stab her in the back. I did not see that one. That one hit me out of the side. And then like I knew Bluefingers was gonna be up to something, but like I didn't know what. And so like the fact that he was like behind it all, I was still thinking it was gonna be Trilody's. So like
Yeah,
he
Yeah.
did a really good job of like keeping all that low key. And like that's even like one of the quotes in the book is when Light Song is given Siri advice. It's like, hey, you know, stay like in the middle somewhere until you're ready to like fully
Right.
commit. And I feel like
which
that
was
whole
like
book was like that.
ultimately the thing that she was like, "Oh my God."
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
like she literally remembered that quote from Light Song and she was like, "Holy shit, it's Bluefingers."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like that was the thing that came to her mind. So yeah, he did a really good job of tying everything back to all the setup. Um, when we get into our ratings, I still have a couple things that are like bugging me about this book that I think he's like fixed in some of his later books, but they're not huge things. And I did enjoy this book. Like after the second half, I can say I enjoyed this book.
Um
Yeah. Okay.
Uh
So what else do we need to go over with Siri and the God King? Like I thought,
I,
okay, I thought his magic once he finally got it
oh yeah.
was insane.
oh
That
Yeah.
was
yeah.
so
Yeah,
sick.
he
It's
went
like
nutty with it.
he just pulls up and just all the colors around him are bending and he's just got like these ropes flying everywhere. Tap bruh.
Yeah,
It's
like the
lit.
whole castle is awakened
Yeah.
basically, and he's like controlling everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
This book needs an adaptation for that scene specifically.
And
Well,
it was a good like because like you expect him to be powerful throughout the whole book, and then
Yeah.
like you get nothing from him, and then right at the end there's payoff.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, honestly, I thought Ciri and Ciceberon was going to be like the focal point of the book, and then they just have this like kind of quiet little romance,
Yeah,
and like
yeah,
that's almost the
but
whole thing for those two.
yeah, but it's like really good chemistry too, and it's like they're really funny together. Like at one point, he like she's teaching him sarcasm, and he's talking about she mentions not being a good seductress, and sorry, and mentions not being a good seductress, and uh she's like, oh, or he's like, I think that was in one of my stories, and she's like, yeah, he's like, I think she or he was trying, or the witch was trying to offer them food.
Yeah.
Yeah, and she's like, yeah, I'm sure great interpretation, Seb. Great job. That cracked me up. But yeah, I think their chemistry in general was really good, but it was really subtle too. It wasn't like up in your face.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Mostly you're just like seeing Siri learn about the priests and like the history of Hallandren, and like that's really all that's going on between the two of them, right up until the end, which I
Right.
think was cool because it was like a misdirection. It was like this is going to be the biggest conflict in the book, and then actually they like each other, and he's not an asshole.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah,
and then you get to focus on Light Song, Vivenna, and Vasher.
yeah.
Right.
And I'm kind of like I'm interested to see like how they rebuild the kingdom and stuff too, and what changes they make because I don't feel like the system's gonna stay the same at all.
Oh
Right.
yeah, for sure. So there is like right now, Warbreaker is a standalone book, but in like Sanderson's Cosmere like outline, he eventually wants to create a sequel for Warbreaker.
That would
With
make so much sense, which
all right,
we'll get into that later, but
right,
that would make
and
so
I'll
much
tell
sense.
you what the pending title for it is. Are you ready?
Go for it.
Nightblood.
Ah, okay.
So that gives you something to think on.
Yeah, it gives you something to look forward to.
But yeah, so let's go ahead and jump into Light Song.
Okay.
Honestly, probably one of my favorite characters ever.
Yeah?
Yeah,
Why
like
is that?
I love how witty he is. I love how he just like comes up with these things in his head, but he's also like, and you know, he like talks like he puts himself down so much. But then he has that scene with Blush Weaver where she's like, "You're literally one of the best of the gods. You listen to everyone's problems. You go through every piece of art. You go through every poem. You make all of us laugh, even when you're insulting us. You're the mood around here, basically." And then obviously we find out that he gave his life up to save his niece, like didn't like
Yeah.
just jumped. And then at the end, he gives his life up to save the kingdom, basically to give the God King the ability to use. I don't know. It
Well, to
just
save Idris, which is
yeah,
even like more selfless of him. He's just like,
Yeah.
"Oh, I don't want all these people to die." And so he gives it. It wasn't even for Hallandren or like himself or the God King. He was just like, "I don't want people to suffer."
yeah,
Yeah.
Which, yeah, his character, I almost feel like, well, I'll leave it. I'll leave it. It's Cosmic Connection stuff. There's gonna be a lot of that, I imagine.
That'll be a long episode.
yeah.
Um,
But and then I don't know. I feel like he's like such a good like he made me laugh throughout the whole book multiple times, and he was just I don't know. He was like I feel like if I was like in this book, that would be like my character. Like that's I'm a smart ass. Like that's what I like to do. So I
yeah.
don't know. I really connected with him in a lot of ways.
Yeah, he's a good character. He's really funny. Like legitimately, even in the first half when I was mostly like bitching and moaning about this book, Light Song was really funny and like
Yeah,
the best part of it. And then in
yeah,
the second half, like it just keeps going.
Yeah.
yeah. And like he's actually really smart. Like starts to figure things out, and then it's like
Yeah, so he starts like investigating around, trying to figure out like why is Blushweaver trying to make these plays for the army or whatever, and like he starts looking into Mercy Star's palace and the break-in, and he
yeah,
finds out about the tunnels, and he starts finding out about all this stuff, and he like genuinely starts thinking he's like I used to be a detective in a past life, like that's who I
yeah.
am, and all this stuff, and Lairmir's just sitting there not telling him anything.
Shaking his head, just shaking his fucking
Just
head, like
like
no.
think about the weight of that now
Yeah,
that you know
Yeah.
like who he actually is. Like
but
imagine being Laramir.
yeah. Also going back though, there's clues that he was like not necessarily an accountant, but mess with numbers because there's multiple times it talks about how good he is with numbers, and like when he's counting the priests, and there was another scene where it talks about how good he is with numbers, and so like there were clues too. Like he's talking about he thinks he's a detective, but there were clues that he wasn't either.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
there were quite a few like references to him being good with numbers.
yeah.
Yeah, and the whole time he's like, I probably wasn't really brave and all this other stuff. And then we find out, he actually really died. He did die in a brave way twice.
Right. Which
Yep.
well, let's go ahead and talk about that. Like, whenever him and Laramir got locked up in the cage, was it right after they slit Blushweaver's throat?
Yes.
No, it was
Which
before.
it was
It was
before?
before it was before they slit Blushweaver's throat. Because he's talking about give me lock picks and I'll figure out how to pick this lock.
Oh
And,
yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
yeah,
that's
yeah,
right.
yeah.
Laramir loses his shit and is like, "You're a fucking accountant,
Yeah,
and you're always getting me into shit. I'm so
dude,
tired of this."
that like chapter, that section, like even rereading it, I forgot about Blushweaver and all that stuff happening, and like I did forget like how Lightsong originally died. So like rereading that chapter, it was also like a revelation for me again about like what had happened, and I remember
Yeah.
my jaw just dropping. Like,
Yeah.
what?
I was really shocked when they killed Blushweaver. I
Yeah.
really
Yeah,
didn't
like
think.
Yeah, like no hesitation, just like
Yeah,
here she is, slit her throat, boom. But
yeah,
like honestly, like she really, I know like her giving them to come out, but she thought she was doing it for good. Like she wasn't. I don't feel like she was a bad character either.
right,
Like I felt like she had some very positive points. She thought
right.
what she was doing was right.
It was kind of like when Vivenna was being controlled by Denth and Tonkva. Like
Yeah,
Blushweaver
Yeah,
was just being controlled by these other people, you know?
yeah,
So, R.I.P. Blushweaver.
yeah. And
yep.
Light Song, R.I.P. Light Song.
Oh man, yeah. So after he finds out who he is, he remembers that he saved his niece.
Yep, the ship was the Red Panther. That's why he kept seeing the Red Panther.
Yep. And he saved his niece. And I honestly I started tearing up a little bit whenever Larmar was talking to him about that's why he believes in the religion, was because if the divine magic or whatever is real and it brought you back after saving,
My daughter,
my
yeah.
daughter, then this religion has to be real. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so, and
Hey, Larimar's a ride or die too.
he really is. He really is.
He sees Light Song running with that sword, knowing Light Song has no idea how to use a sword, and he's like, "Well, here we go," and jumps on some dude's back.
Yeah.
Yeah, he didn't think twice.
And then when they're trying to like sneak through the Mercy Weaver.
Mercy Star.
Mercy Star. When they're trying to sneak through Mercy Star's place to get to the tunnels, and he looks through the window and he sees the guards. And he's like, "How do we do this?" And then Light Song's like, "Second plan," and he just like stands up, puffs his chest out, and starts walking past the guards. That cracked me up. Larimar's just back there shaking his head like, "What?" And like Larimar and the guard are looking at him in shock, and Light Song's just going with it.
Yeah. Yeah. Lightsong, I definitely think Lightsong might be my favorite character for the book, so.
Yeah. It was a little weird to me that he could use his breath to heal Sisebron's tongue specifically. I don't really get how that fits into the magic system.
It was just to heal. It was to heal a person in general.
Yeah.
So like
the petitions and everything that he's been receiving every single morning since he's waked up. Like people come to petition to the gods and be like, "I have this disease. I have this issue. Please cure me." And if that's how gods die, essentially, is they say,
right? No, I get that part. I get that part. It's just
breath is intent too. They say that multiple times in the book. Like so like when he was giving his breath, his intention was probably, "Hey, heal his tongue."
Yeah.
Right. But then the only thing that the breath can do outside of like the return's breath being able to heal people is awaken things. And so like I don't really get how it just heal. I don't know. Usually Sanderson's systems are like bulletproof, and that was a little weird to me.
Well, I don't. So like the returned have one breath, but it's a more powerful breath. It's
a breath so
powerful
powerful
breath.
it gets to the fifth heightening. Yeah.
And that's why they can heal people, because if you remember, the fifth heightening is when you give people, or when you have immortality or whatever, basically.
Right.
Agelessness or something.
Yeah, agelessness.
Well,
so
Severum was already at the 10th heightening though, so that's why it's a little.
Right, but
they cut his tongue out after that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm just nitpicking. I'm splitting hairs.
No,
it doesn't really. It doesn't really matter. It's just kind of. I was like, huh.
But yeah, so that's how that works.
Yeah. Okay. Well, do y'all want to get into Vivenna?
Honestly, probably. I mean, I love the way that Sanderson handled this character.
Oh my god! It was after spending an entire
Hating
episode
her.
bitching about Vivenna.
Yeah, exactly.
She could not be more like transformed in the second half of the book.
I think he handled it perfectly. He put her in the gutter with everybody else, kicked her off her high horse, and she like got down in the dirt literally and saw how everybody else lived and was like, "Hey, I can wear pants and all this other stuff because I literally walked around in a shift. I can eat fish because I went hungry." Like it was so realistic to me as far as like someone like uh
A perspective shift.
yeah, a
Like,
perspective shift. And made so much sense, and I love the way that she was handled, and honestly became a character I enjoyed at the end of the book.
Yeah.
yeah, by the end of the book, I was like, oh, okay, yeah, this is a character I can hang out with.
Which,
Yeah.
if we saw, like we said last episode, like somebody that like we literally didn't feel like we even needed her character, we hated her character. So for that big of a shift, I thought that was a really really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a testament to Sanderson because I could not have had more problems with this book in the first half, and like Vivenna was just that was crazy. It was crazy how much he did with that character in like 2 chapters.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and if you pay attention to like some of the stuff she's saying, like in the chapters leading up to her getting to where she's begging and stuff. Like she mentions multiple times about like so like in one chapter she'll be like, "I hate fish. I'll never eat this stuff." And at one point she's like, "How could anyone become a prostitute?" And it's just multiple times you see stuff, and then like when she's begging and stuff, you see the opposite. She's like,
I'll
I'll
do
eat
anything.
yeah, I'll eat whatever. And she's like almost becoming a prostitute and like all this other stuff, and it's just
Yeah.
like it's
Yeah.
literally
She even, like,
direct
She even
shifts.
tries selling her hair because like she's like, oh, I can grow this back, but like in order to grow her hair back, she has to eat, and
Yeah,
she's
she has
not
to have
getting
sustenance.
enough money to grow her like to buy food to eat
Well,
and
if
grow
I
her hair
remember
back.
correctly, she gave herself a time. Like she was like, if I'm hungry for the X amount longer, I'll go sell my body.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
she was to that point of like desperation. And then the scene where she talks to the little boy who kicked her out of the alleyway
Yeah.
is like a full circle moment where you're like, okay, she's legitimately a better person now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like she has real empathy and like depth now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Vivenna had the most character growth.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
Um,
And
so,
like I was saying, I did not see Dith betraying her that leads up to the character growth. Glad he
yeah.
did. Glad we got the character growth. I didn't see that coming. And like I said, that's usually not how when I'm reading books, like I'm looking for stuff like that, and I didn't see it.
Right.
Well,
Even
once
though
she saw the
he's
dead animals on the wall, though, that was when I was like, "Oh my god, Tonk Faw's a serial killer."
yeah,
And then,
that's what I knew that I knew then too. But like it's just so funny because like when we're reading the first half, like we're Vivenna because like Death is saying all this stuff about mercenaries, like telling her basically like don't trust me, and Tonk Fall is giving us multiple hints that he's a torturer, and we're just like nah,
oh,
these guys
these
mercenary
these
humor.
quirky
Yeah,
guys.
these quirky
Look
guys.
at yeah. They've got her best interest in mind.
I thought it was so funny because like we're basically Vivenna, like we fell for the same trick.
Yeah. Yeah. It really hits though whenever like she finally escapes Vasher, she goes back and she sees Parlin just like hung up and
Oh
she's
yeah.
like, "No, what's going on?" And then like Tonkfa's like, "We knew you're like when'd you find out or whatever?" And it's like you're still confused like what's going Oh. Oh.
Oh
Yeah.
Oh.
yeah.
Like it's
What tipped
just
you
the
off? Yeah.
domino effect of like, "Oh, I've been wrong this whole time. Oh no, what's going to happen?"
Yeah, that was the moment where I got excited to finish the book.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
that was where I was like, "Oh my god, I got to see where this goes."
And all the stuff they were doing up to that stuff started making more sense too.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
being
yeah. There was
time
a
bought, yeah.
huge payoff, right? Like in that one moment, there was so much payoff.
Yeah.
Really cool. And then Vivenna gets involved with Vasher.
Right. And
If we want to go into Vasher.
yeah, well, real quick, he starts teaching Vivenna like how to start awakening stuff and like gives
Yeah.
her a sword and tries to show her, here's how you hold it. And she's like, "I'm not going to know how to do this." And he's like, "But if you know how to hold it, you're going to cause people to like hesitate." And that moment counts. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And she ends up using that at the end, she
Well,
holds.
she gets so good so quick too.
Yeah,
Yeah, which she kind of that does seem to get explained a little bit because they have the blood of the first
Returned.
the
Yeah.
first returned. So they're maybe like naturally skilled at
Yeah.
it.
Well, she's strong-willed too, and like we were talking, rest a lot of it is intent. So like it makes sense. But it was funny because Vasher's basically like, "Hey, these commands are really complicated. You can't do these yet." And then she just like uses the same words he used and uses it, awakens
Yeah.
and stuff like he does.
yeah,
But one of the things was we were talking about Parlin. I like the scene right before that when he's like, he's obviously into Jules and Vivenna is jealous of him, and he's like, "Why would we be together? You've
Yeah.
never even been
Yeah,
nice
you've
to me."
never been nice to me.
That's
Yeah,
like-
that was a really
That
good
cracked
moment
me
too.
up.
it's just kind of like I think that's the start of like people being like, yeah, why is Vivenna like the way she is? Like she thinks Parlin's and her were supposed to like what is all this stuff? Like Vivenna's on a high horse, it's horrible, and then everything just goes south and it's just the biggest reality check for her that she's ever had in her life. And as much as I loved Parlin, he needed to die for her to realize
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. Poor little plot device Parlin.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, her kicking the ass was. I mean, it wasn't fun to read because I mean she was in the dumps, but like it was satisfying.
right.
I guess.
Right. But we can move on to Vasher now, I think, and talk
Is that
a
what
little
we're
bit
calling him
about
still?
Vasher or sorry,
Collide, Peacemaker.
Warbreaker, the peaceful.
Warbreaker the
Oh
Peaceful.
yeah. So
Um,
was he the first returned? Or
I
no?
think so. Yes.
Okay.
I don't.
Or I think he was one
Did
of the
they say
first
that?
5.
Yeah. So
Well, he
no,
was one of
they
the
had
five
the 5
scholars.
scholars. They had
Yeah,
the
one
5
of the 5
scholars. I don't
scholars. There you go.
think he was the first return though, was he? Well,
I'm not
actually,
too
he would
sure.
he would have to be because the first returned was the first God King, right? And that's who had,
Yes.
and that's
And
where
that's what
Vivenna's
started
line
the-
came from.
Yeah, and that's what started the
And Shashara was his wife. I'm assuming. I think it says that, but they were
Does it?
together. I think
I
they
don't
said
know.
we
It's
were
all in
together.
the last chapter in the epilogue, so I'm flipping through it real quick. But I think you're right.
So would that maybe be? I'm wondering how they, because it mentions in the book they still don't know how the first returned had a kid, and I'm wondering.
Yeah.
I'm wondering about that.
Maybe returned can only have kids with other returned.
I don't know.
No, because it talks all the time. It was in the beginning of the book. It talks about how the returns still like to try to have kids. Surely
just
one of them
can't,
would have
yeah.
had one. Yeah.
Hmm.
But yeah, so I mean, so he's Warbreaker the Peaceful. He's Khaled. He's the dude who made these Khaled's phantoms, which were in front of you guys the entire time.
Yeah, whole
the
time.
the
Yeah,
Daedalier,
statues.
Yeah.
the Daedalier statues. I remember the first time I read this book, I pictured those statues so vividly in my mind, like that they're just all over the place. Because like when Vivenna's begging, that's where she's begging. Like she's begging on statues, like because they're just everywhere. And she's like, "Oh, I'll just lean up against the statue today or whatever." And I'm just like, "This is weird that they have statues." And then at the end of the book, they march out of the city, and I'm like, "What?" Like I just thought it was pretty dope. But Vasher was the one who was in charge of. Or Vasher was the one who made those, and it turns out that the reason the God King has so many breaths is because Vasher gave that to him to hold on,
Yeah, those were his breaths originally.
so that way, whenever it was time to use the Daedalier again, he was ready. And like that's why, and he's like, I'm the one who's responsible for cutting out your tongue, and it's because like he's had, or like all the priests knew from past religions that that's why you cut out his tongue. Was because the breaths are not the God Kings. They're Vashers, essentially. So
Yeah.
I thought that
He's
was
basically
super
using them
cool.
as a bank.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting. Well, okay, did it ever actually say how the God Kings just passed their
So when
breaths
you
on?
when you get to the 10th heightening, you can awaken through will. You don't have to say anything.
Right.
Oh, but they hadn't trained him.
Yeah,
how
they
to
hadn't
do
trained
it.
him.
Right.
That's right. Okay, because I was thinking the kind of like lazy part of the ending to me was the like you don't actually have to be pregnant. Like we can just say you're pregnant, and then we have this returned infant somewhere randomly.
Right.
Yeah.
Like that was a little goofy to me. But then I guess if they were lying about see, I don't know, it's just weird that the priests like are devout, but they also know that they're lying about portions of the religion.
Right. Well, I mean, what's new?
Well, yeah. Uh, got me there. But
um,
so like they are devout in the iridescent tones, but then they also know that like the God King doesn't actually have a stillborn that is returned. Like it just kind of randomly happens.
yeah.
Yeah, well, I don't remember. No, Bluefinger says that, but he says it's not what's real. It's what people believe,
Yeah.
and so I'm sure a lot of that stuff they just have to keep up the act because it's what people believe.
Right. And
Plus,
also,
it's easier to do all that stuff if
yeah.
people just, yeah,
I'm also pretty sure like only like Susabron's priests, like only the ones who are like around him, like his inner circle of priests, know the truth. Like Larimar had no idea. Like most priests of the religions, like I would say like 95% of the priests of the religions don't know that fact. Like they
Yep.
believe everything 100%. It's just
Well,
that small person.
Bluefingers didn't either, and he said he's been the God King scholar for
Yeah.
his life, basically.
Do we think that Vasher set it up that way intentionally? Like he designed the religion to function this way?
I think he could have. He might have.
Yeah. I mean, we know Vasher's extremely intelligent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even by the way he fights, like he should have lost that duel with Denth, but he won just off because he's smart
Right.
and like he's tactical. He's a tactical fighter. He uses everything around him. We see that multiple times with rope, with claw, whatever he can get his hands on.
Right.
Yeah. Well, even when he's got Nightblood out, he's just slashing walls, turning them to smoke so he can get back to Vivenna faster.
Yeah.
And like,
Yeah.
Dude,
he does not care.
what the scene was it the scene yeah the scene with where he's like standing on the table and slicing through the ceiling and jumping up.
Yeah.
Dude, that was so dope to visualize. Like, oh, I want a movie adaptation so bad so I can see that.
Oh,
like,
dude, I have some Nightblood comments when we get to Cosmere Connections.
oh yeah. Well, real quick, let's talk about Nightblood because we found out how he was created.
Shashara.
Yeah.
Yeah, Shashara put 1,000 breaths into him.
Yeah.
1,000 breaths, and they gave him a command: destroy evil. So that's why he's let's go destroy evil. But they found out that the problem was he doesn't understand, like he only sees like things as evil or not evil, whereas like humans, they have both in them. You know what I'm saying? So
well,
he's
even
always,
then though, like he mentions multiple times, like I don't know what evil is.
Yeah,
Right.
He's pretty honest with Vivenna about that. He's
Well,
like, I'm
that's
not
like-
quite sure what that is, but
Let's
we
go
can
do
kill
it.
it.
Yeah. Well, that's like last episode I brought up how they remind me of like AI, like Terminator type shit, and that it like even gets like even more. I see that in this half because it's like protect humans, and then they interpret that as well. You got to kill humans to protect them because they're self-destructive. So like I see that in Nightblood. He's like destroy evil. Well, okay.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of a iRobot thing too.
yeah.
Yeah, it's like it's sentient enough to make decisions, but not to like judge humans.
Yeah. Well, so do we think that Nightblood is learning any of that stuff though?
It does seem like he's learning and like
I do. I
growing.
agree. I know. At one point, Vasher says that animated or awakened objects can't grow, but I disagree with that. And like they also mentioned multiple times that they don't know as much. They barely know anything about breath. So like I think that he's growing too. I think he's kind of learning what evil is and all that stuff. He's obviously loyal to Vasher, and at one point he even says something like, "Well, if you believe it, then it must be so," or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Oh,
I also
your
think
judgment is best, is what he says.
I think that the like lust for Nightblood that he inspires, like the reason that Vasher always just throws him in his sheath and like leaves him to murder people, I think that's really cool, and I'm like curious how that functions, or like what the Like I'm
Yeah.
sure, especially if we get Nightblood as like a sequel, eventually we'll figure that out. But
Yep.
that's one of the coolest things to me, like the scene where they're just beating each other to death with him still in the sheath
Yeah,
in the
but
hallway.
it only affects certain people. So like one of the things I was thinking of is like I wonder if it's like a scale, and like if like your evil is just a little bit higher than your good, then it calls to you like that. But if your
Right.
good's a little higher, it just like makes you nauseous when you're near it. Because we see that with Vivenna and the servant girl that he pulls it out on to figure out where Ciri's at. She gets nauseous, but like she's not drawn to it.
Right.
Right. Yeah, she's not hungry for it. Like the all the hired goons are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Real quick, while we were kind of like talking about Nightblood, Shashara, and Denth, did you guys notice Denth's name? Like his actual name?
Oh, I
It's
did, and I
something
forgot to.
it's something Trellides.
Yeah, so his name's
Uh,
Vara Trellides.
yeah,
And what's the name of Susebron's priest?
Trellides.
Do you think there's a connection there?
He might have been Vasher's priest. Because I think that
Oh, yeah, that would be really interesting. But no, they were all the five scholars,
Right.
right? Like Shishara and Vasher and Denth, and then the guy who killed
Yeskill
in
and
the
Archville.
duel.
Yes,
Yeah,
Yeskill
yeah.
and Archville. Yeah.
I don't know. I found that as I was reading over it, because I'm pretty sure they only say Vara Trellides twice in the book.
Yeah.
And
So I'm gonna be honest. I looked that up.
okay.
Because I saw that same thing and I was like really confused. I was like, are these two people related? And that's when I saw that spoiler I told you all about
Oh
at the
yeah.
beginning. Yeah, yeah. But basically, what it said when I looked it up, which this could be wrong, is that Trellides is more of like a title.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Gotcha.
Huh. Yeah, I don't know. I do hope that we get that sequel and get some
Yeah.
of these things like more fleshed out.
Yeah.
But as
Well, we
like a
also
self-contained story, I thought this
Yeah,
was
it's
yeah,
pretty
pretty
good.
good.
I really enjoyed it.
You
We
wanna
also found out that the return can feed off their extra breasts to stay alive.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Which
which
but
we had kind of postulated that already, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
but the priests only give them one breath a week, so
Yeah.
just enough to keep them
Except the
alive.
God King, but yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, but
And
the
then
God King's a bank, so
yeah, and we also figure out so at the end because we see Vasher, he's able to give all his breath away, and he at the end Vivenna asks him, "How do you do that?" And he says, "That's my secret."
yeah. There are
So, like,
definitely lots of
that's really
secrets still
interesting.
left, so
Yeah,
Yeah, and Vasher could like alter people's memory too.
yeah. Well, that and the girl and the dog were naturally drawn to him.
yeah.
Remember that?
Yeah.
So like I thought it said that maybe it was because of his the quality of his breath, but like I don't know. I feel like there's more to that of why they would be naturally like just drawn to him.
Yeah, I don't know. I spent a lot of time thinking about that. Like I guess it's saying that his returned breath is what draws things to him and like lets him cheat basically.
But that's the deal. He doesn't have his returned breath anymore. Remember at the beginning, because he's like he's like I can jump to the fifth heightening anytime I want, but to do
Right.
that, so he keeps it somewhere. He keeps his returned breath somewhere.
Oh, well, he used it at the end though, right? When he's talking to Sisebron like on the parapets or whatever.
Yeah, that's how he gets
Oh.
that form.
I have a
Yeah,
theory.
so
It's like-
it's in a cloth on him somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, do we want to move on into our ratings and final thoughts?
Let's see.
We didn't talk about Denth much.
Oh yeah, we didn't.
That was a big character. Like,
He had the biggest grudge.
yeah, and he was the character we liked the most in the first half.
Yeah.
It seemed like.
Well, so like I kind of get why he has a grudge because obviously he says that they were best friends and that Shashara was his sister. And we see that Vasher killed her because she was. It seems like she was kind of like egotistical. Like she's like, "Hey, look what I made," because it talks about how Yes still created the Ichor that goes in the lifeless, and so like it really put a drive in her to do something. And like she gives all the lifeless or the one word lifeless commands to everybody, and then she makes the sword, and he's worried that she's gonna like tell other people. And so just like knowing his character, like I feel like there's way more to that because I don't feel like he would kill her just based off like an idea that she would go tell people how to do that.
Well, I think he had to have been pissed at her already for the one breath lifeless commands, and then she creates Nightblood, or vice versa,
Well,
right? Like she already
he helped create Nightblood, so I don't think it's the creation of Nightblood that was the problem. I mean, it
right,
might have
but then
became the problem, but
he's worried that she's going to tell other people
other
about
people how to
Nightblood,
do it,
and
yeah,
then all the lifeless are going to have sentient swords.
swords.
And
Wait,
yeah,
well,
Oh gosh.
yeah, that would be pretty awful. But yeah, it does seem like there'd be more to that. I just feel like maybe she was being resistant and being like, no, what's the issue? Like, fuck it, Hallinger for life, bruh.
yeah,
Basically.
yeah.
Um. Okay. Well.
And then we see that so Nightblood, so like uh we were talking about how like why he makes them do that. At one point he says he controlled the fishermen. So like it's not like a crazy reaction. Like he's in charge of the controlling these people.
Oh, true. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, does it say that he controlled him? Because I mean, he kind
Yeah,
of just
he
talked
says
to him and told him what to do.
yeah, well that's what he says though. He says uh I'd have to find the quote, but he basically says like he did this stuff because I told him to.
Huh. Well, I can't say that's surprising. He's like crazy. Nightblood is like crazy powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which
And like
I
the
don't feel
the
like a
fisherman probably just has his one breath.
but I'm wondering why he's so powerful because I don't feel like 1,000 breaths would do it. Because like we see other people get close to 1,000 and like they've got a lot of power, but not near like that.
Well, but they said
Well,
a
he
lot of
also eats. Oh, God.
they Vasher said that a lot of like the magic that he can use is lost. Like people forgot how to use it, and Vasher said that's for the best. And so
Yeah,
there's still tons of stuff that people don't know how to like. There's so much potential with this, but he's not sharing it because, you know,
He
yeah,
doesn't want another many war.
exactly.
But my theory with Nightblood is like he sucks all the breath out of Vasher while he's using him. So I think anytime he's drawn, he's like sucking up breath from, and anything he
everybody.
kills,
Yeah, that
like
makes sense.
so I think he's like banking breath every time he cuts something or he's like drawn.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, it talks about how he makes colors deeper and like so like uh the God King he brightens everything around him. But like Nightblood makes everything deeper. It said makes them like so. It said it made like reds burgundy and like blues navy. So like he could have so much power or so much breath that he changes the colors around him.
Right.
Yeah, and he could also have higher quality breaths too because he came straight from like Shishara and Vasher.
Yeah,
So it could be kind of like the returned breath being like higher quality.
yeah. And then we figure out that the return can make themselves look like anything they want.
Yeah, that was a crazy
Yeah.
revelation too.
Yeah,
It's all about how they see themselves or whatever.
yeah.
Yeah, which I want to know. Light Song says that like he's Light Song the Bold because he died in a brave way. How did Blushweaver end up as the goddess that she was? How did
So
she die?
so in the book, well, you know she's the god. She was originally the goddess of honesty before she got switched to beauty. It mentions that in the
Yeah,
book.
well, she's still the goddess of like honesty and communication.
Yeah. So, in the book or the book on the phone, the ebook, I don't know if the physical copy has this, but it's got like each chapter has like a afterword or whatever from Sanderson.
Oh no, I
Uh,
don't.
yeah, it's got like it's got annotations for each chapter.
Ooh.
Yeah, and so one of them that I read, which I didn't get to read all of them. I wish I could have, but one of them I read was talking about how she got her name. She went. There was like some merchants, or no, there's some dye people maybe. Anyways, they were like cheating the system, and she like went to court and testified against them and told the truth, and they killed her for it.
Oh, okay. All
Okay.
right. That makes some sense.
Interesting.
I guess she just saw herself as a busty lady.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, she could have just been naturally attractive, and then everyone tells her, "Hey, you're beautiful, you're beautiful, you're beautiful," and she slowly starts to become more beautiful. You know?
Right.
Yeah, because of her like self-perception.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought that was a cool thing to throw in there, the fact that the return can shapeshift. I think this book is like ripe for a sequel, especially with like all the stuff that references it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that and just I think it'd be really good with the way Sanderson has grown as a writer too.
Oh yeah. Because this
Well,
came out before Way of Kings. And so
yeah. And his exposition is the thing about his writing that I always struggle with, but then once he gets everything rolling downhill, I'm like totally glued to my seat, like
yeah.
reading along.
Yeah.
So I think now that he's got the world set up and the characters established, it would be so cool to read like Vivenna and Vasher's adventures and like how Ciri and Ciceberon are like faring at court and everything.
Yeah.
Which we didn't talk about that either. Where they're going, where Vasher and Vivenna are going to see
Yeah.
Yes Still and some dictator.
Yeah, and they're like bringing back the two cities that were destroyed in the mini war.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah. Some dictator's trying to bring those cities back, and
Yeah. Kuth and
Yes
Huth.
Still's
Yeah.
Yes Still's
Yeah.
helping him, and it said he had a new invention.
Yeah.
Ah, okay. Do we think it's like a different type of lifeless, maybe?
Well, he made the Ichor, so maybe it's like
A more efficient
yeah.
lifeless, or
I don't know.
it didn't really give us
Yeah.
much
It
to
didn't give us
speculate
much.
about
Yeah.
until we get into connections.
Yeah. Which we'll get there later. Actually, get there pretty soon.
Yeah, pretty
Um,
soon.
But yeah.
Are we
Anything
ready
else?
to do our ratings?
Yeah. I
Okay.
am. All right, let's go ahead and kick it off with characters. On a scale of 1 to 10, where would you guys rate these characters in this book?
Woodson, you want to start?
Sure. So I would say a 6. No, a 5. I'll do a 5.
Really?
Okay.
And yeah, and if not for okay, so Vivenna's arc over the whole story is fantastic, but then Ciceberon isn't really. He's kind of two-dimensional. Even by the end of the story, he's kind of two-dimensional. Like he's not a bad character. He's just not like the deepest
I feel like
character.
he was kind of a background character, though.
Yeah.
Yeah. Same thing for me with Ciri, where she's really not a focal point, and she's not like the deepest character. She's a totally fine, totally serviceable character that I don't hate, but she's just not like the deepest, most like endearing character. Light Song was fantastic. Vasher got fantastic, but he was kind of just the silent. I mean, he was like Batman, right? Like
Yeah.
he had like
Just a
three
mace
I
words.
feel like yeah, but I feel like okay, so I feel like in the first half of the book, Denth was the Vasher character, and then in the last half of the book, Vasher was the Vasher character. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that's fair
Yeah.
enough. But yeah, so Vasher got better in the second half, and I started to like really like him in the second half. But aside from like, they're just not the deepest characters. I think he could definitely fix that with another book and like letting me spend more time with them. But just in this like self-contained story, I think the characters are like they from half one to half two, they go from like a 3 to a 7. So I'm saying a 5.
Okay.
Like overall.
Okay. Dylan, what about you?
So like I'm kind of approaching it a different way. Like I'm not really like I feel like there was some definitely deepness to some of the characters, but like I'm going off like how well I enjoy reading the characters and just all that. And I'm gonna say like a 7.5 to an 8. I loved Light Song. Vivenna made a complete turnaround. I enjoyed her character at the end. Ciri was very intelligent. I enjoyed like watching her try to figure things out. I like the hell out of Dent before he, switched sides.
Yeah.
Trying to think. So Sebron, like I kind of agree with Whitson, and like I said, to me he was more of a background character. But like even when we did figure him out, like we saw him kind of grow and start learning stuff. Blushweaver, I enjoyed her character just because of her banter with Light Song and like how she kept up. And
Hmm.
then we see that at the end, like she was actually trying to do things for the right reason. Um, and Larimar, I like Larimar too. Having to put
Yeah.
up with Light, so I really like the characters.
Yeah.
Like,
5 might be too. Okay, maybe a 6.
Okay.
You convinced me. You convinced me. 5 is a little rude.
yeah, yeah. What about you? What about you, Ed?
I'm gonna say an 8, and I think the reason I'm that high is because there never once was like a chapter that I like got to and I'm like, oh, I don't want to read this character. You know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah,
every time I flipped and it's like, oh, it's Vivenna. Like obviously in the beginning of the book we don't really like Vivenna that much, but granted I knew what was gonna happen, so it's like I was
yeah.
excited about it. I never really was like,
Well,
dude, we got another Light Song chapter that I have to get through before I can
yeah,
get to, Vasher or whatever. So, and I also just really think like the characters were very well written too. So,
yeah. I agree with that. I feel like Vivenna's early chapters were saved by like the mercenaries and what they
yeah,
were
yeah,
doing and what was going on, and then like her later chapters, it's like, hey, I'm growing as a person. I'm learning, awakening. Like I said, she really changed.
yeah. All right, let's talk about setting.
Setting.
Okay, I guess I can go first. 7.5.
Okay.
The dye industry and like the court of the gods and all the statues, like there's a lot of imagery in this book and a lot of like really cool like set pieces, I guess, and they were referenced in like meaningful ways, with like the statues coming to life and like the flowers being the like cornerstone of the Hallandren economy. Like I thought the setting was really good.
Yep.
It's
Yeah.
it, you know
So, you finish what you said.
No, it's okay. I got my point out.
So I really agree with the fact I love the setting we see. So I love Tetelar. Like we see the court of the gods. We got a big black pyramid with like multicolored houses all around it, all the colors, all the fanciful dressing, and then like Whitson was saying, the statues are really cool. I'm gonna give it like a 7. And the only reason it's not higher is because we only saw one city, I feel like we saw a little bit of Idrian, Idris,
Yeah, Idris.
Idris. But as far as like the rest of the world, and like again, that could be easily fixed in a second book.
Right.
But like the setting we see was awesome. But
Yeah.
like I said, we just kind of stayed in the one city, and had the slums too. There's always
Yeah. Yeah.
which is obviously gonna be darker color, and yeah. So
Yeah. I'm also gonna give it a 7. For pretty much the same reasons. Like the setting that we see is amazing, and I love how interactive the magic of this world is with the setting, because it literally changes how things look around you. And
Yeah.
it's just such a dope image. It's dope imagery in your mind as like you're reading through this. Like you can really see like the walls darkening and things like that. So
yeah.
I give it a 7.
Okay.
And what about plot?
For plot, man, it's tough because man, 5.5. I'm gonna say 5.5. It wraps up pretty well, but I feel like there's still some loose ends and plot holes and like some plot devicey stuff.
Right.
But I think he does a pretty good job at tying everything together at the end, and I don't think that it's like I don't think that the plot is stupid. I don't think
Right.
it's bad. It's just not like the best thing I've ever read, but it's also it's worth reading.
Yeah.
Like just the overall story structure. Like it's not bad. It's just not my
Right.
favorite.
Yeah.
Okay.
So my deal with plot, I kind of find it hard to rate because throughout the entire book, we have all these different people doing all this different stuff, and in the end, none of it matters. like, like,
Yeah,
which is cool because
It's a giant red herring, you know.
yeah, it's a giant
yeah,
red
yeah.
herring. But it's like, how do you rate plot when 75% of the book is
The
basically
characters
meaningless?
chasing their tails around.
Yeah,
In a
exactly.
circle.
Yeah, because like all that stuff they tried to start the war, all that stuff they tried to prevent the war, like, and that's the thing also like that I don't get is why was Denth trying to do all this stuff to start the war when they were just gonna steal all the lifeless commands anyways? I mean, I know I guess technically they had to get it all on. They wanted Blushweaver to have all of them, and so they got it down to 2 people. But like, if you're already gonna kill 2 gods, why not kill 4 gods?
Right.
Well, they were
Well,
trying to justify it for the masses,
yeah,
I
for
think.
Pankal.
So
They were being paid by Pankal to do the job. And like Vasher even said
Right.
the thing about like, why are you a mercenary now, Denth? And like even Denth like felt like kind of shameful in that moment too or whatever.
Well,
So
well, my thing is like maybe there are things. Maybe my rating for this book would be higher if I reread it.
yeah.
And could pick up on some of the clues.
Yeah,
But
like I was
to
saying,
me, it didn't feel like you could really like reasonably predict that Pankal would like no matter how deep you were digging into it on a first read, I don't think you could predict that Pankal was going to be the one behind
but
everything.
but that's a good thing to me too.
Yeah,
But
it's not a bad thing. It's just kind of I've seen
Right.
this like red herring thing done better elsewhere.
Okay.
Is
Yeah.
all I'm saying.
yeah,
So I would rate the plot probably about a 6. And I think the reason why it's so low for me is I also agree with you guys. Like it's hard to like see everything coming. And even on a reread, like whenever like you read about Bluefingers's interactions with Siri, like there's little hints, but like you have to know that they're there in order to see them. You know what I'm saying?
yeah,
But one of my biggest issues with the plot, and I kind of mentioned this earlier, but I didn't get into it, was at the end of the book in the Sanderlanche. It's like, you know how every like TV show or every book or whatever, when it has like all the action happening, it's like all the characters know a part of the puzzle. If they would just get together and tell each other, then they would know.
Yeah.
In this book, it felt like all the other characters had different like pieces of the puzzle of information. But
but they
instead
still
of
wouldn't know.
no. But this instead of like them getting together and sharing the information and them figuring out, it's just like whenever they needed to figure it out, they figured it out. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, oh, Light Song, finally like is next to the God King, and he looks over and he goes, oh, he has no tongue. Oh, that makes sense. And that's just like that. That's that. And the same with like Vivenna and Vasher. They're like, we need to go like. We need the God King's breaths or whatever. Or what was they saying about the army? Like, how are we going to stop the army going on? And they're like, well, let's just go talk to the God King first.
Yeah, let's
Like,
just go ask.
how do you know that he's able to talk? You know what I'm saying? Like, it just
Yeah.
felt very like no one, like the central conflict of like everyone having bits of information, no one shared it, and yet it was still figured out. And
Yeah, they
it
just
was
kinda
figured out
stumbled into all of it.
suddenly. Yeah, it was figured out suddenly too, which was the thing for me. But that's my only complaint with it. I still really love this book. Like,
I do too, and that's why it was so hard for me to grade
Yeah.
the plot because I like the way it was written. Like I
Right.
enjoyed the red herring aspect of it, but like that's not really plot to me. Like plot to me is like when everything kind of comes together.
yeah,
And like it did, but like you said, in kind of like a pie in the face kind of way.
yeah,
Yeah. That was how it left me feeling was like, oh, the plot just kind of happened all of a sudden.
yeah,
And it was like it was a little unsatisfying. I mean, look, the by the end of the book, I was like happy with it.
right.
But it's still in the moment I was just like, well, okay, but aside from Vivenna helping the mercenaries, like none of the characters had anything to do with this.
Right.
Yeah.
Like this just could have happened anyways.
Right.
And that was my whole deal with it. Like they could have had the pawn call people could have had the exact same plan of they could have took 4 gods instead of 2 and got the lifeless commands. They could have still killed the God King and the Siri and made it look like what they were trying to make it look like. And
They didn't even need an Idrian daughter to do
Right.
any of it. They could have just pinned the death of the God King on Idris.
yeah, well, I mean, it does make it. Well, they wanted the Idrian
It did make
daughter
it
to-
easier.
Yeah, and they wanted the Idrian daughter to make the Idrians mad at them too, because they didn't want the Idrians running up in the mountains and hiding.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Which does make some sense, but like also they could have just had Idrians rioting and
Yeah.
Hallandren and
Well,
probably still.
I feel like the whole like Court of the Gods thing just didn't matter. Like most of the book is trying to convince them to start the war, but at the end of the day, the Pawn Call people could have just did their plan and they would have started the war anyways without all
Yeah,
the
I feel like
But they
I feel
were
like a
using the
little
Court of the
more-
Gods to do that, though. You know what I'm saying?
Right, but there was like no political intrigue. Like you never spent any time in the Court of the Gods where they're
Except
like
for the
voting
very last,
and like
yeah.
yeah,
Except for the very
they're
vote.
not like they're not ever trading power or like there's not any consequence for the Court of the Gods right up until the end with the lifeless commands.
Right.
But again, I don't feel like it was needed. Like I feel like the Court of Gods could have just been left out because like that plan works without any political thing going on.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
if the God King dies and Ciri dies, they're gonna have a war anyways. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, the whole kind of Blushweaver like side plot with the lifeless is kind of useless because they could have just gone individually to the
And that's not to take away. I really enjoyed the book. It's a
Right.
good book. I would suggest reading the book. It's just like if I'm nitpicking, it's like the plot was kind of like, eh.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, if we're doing ratings for every book, I'm looking at our schedule for the rest of the year, and it's got some tough competition. So you know,
yeah.
That's
there's nothing
fair.
wrong with being honest
Yeah.
about it.
So
But like I said, I think we all unanimously recommend this book. Like this
Yeah,
is a
100%.
fun. This is a fun book.
this is a great Sanderson.
And we should also, I don't know about y'all, but Attend to Me is like outstanding.
Oh, yeah.
like,
Attend to Me would be Words of Radiance.
you mean
I don't know about that.
Oathbreaker? You mean Oathbreaker?
No.
I don't-
Hey, we'll get into that in Cosmic Connection. But yeah.
does that do it for book 2?
I think that does.
I think that does it for book 2.
Make sure, guys, that you you share, like, subscribe, follow on your preferred platform. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. So we have YouTube comments, which we ask that you keep spoiler free up to the points of the book that we're in. Obviously, we just finished this book, so feel free to talk freely about it, but keep the Cosmere connections out of the comments, because there might be some people who haven't fully read the Cosmere into that. So Dylan, next month's book, you want to say it again for those?
Yep. It's Empire of the Vampire by Jay Kristoff, and we're going to read the prologue through chapter 2. So we're going to read chapter 1, 2, and the prologue for next episode.
Awesome. Well, we're going to go ahead and end the episode here and go into our Cosmere connections. So this gives you some time to click off the video or the podcast if you have not read the rest of the Cosmere. We're going to mainly be discussing things in Stormlight Archive up to Dawnshard, not Rhythm of War, so you can stick around if you haven't read Rhythm of War. But yeah, we're going to go ahead and end the episode here for that. So we hope you guys have a good one.
Thanks for watching.
Thanks.
All right. Cosmere
Hoy.
Connections
This is
time.
We
gonna be a
know.
juicy one.
I want to start off. We know I love Wit.
Right.
Hoy uses the same storytelling method as Wit with the sand, and he says, I learned the method many years ago from a man who didn't know who he was in a distant place where two lands meet and gods have died.
Okay.
Well, can I break your heart a little bit here, Dylan?
What?
Yasna calls Wit Hoyd.
Does he really?
Yep.
Yeah.
So we finally meet Wit? That doesn't
Yep.
break my
Wit
heart.
Hoy.
That makes me happy that I know who he
Well,
is.
you sounded so excited
Yeah.
for that revelation. And
Okay, but now I'm-
the second he said Hoyd, I was like, oh my god, what's in this book?
Yeah.
So now I'm wondering, though, who he learned the storytelling method from and what land he was in.
Well, it definitely sounds like he was in this world.
Well, that's what I was. Two lands meet
Where
and gods
gods
have
have died.
died.
Right.
Well, it said a distant place where two lands meet and gods have died.
Okay, but what I want to know, and I mean this is like the big question, right? How in the hell do Azure and Zyle end up on Roshar? How the fuck do they make that
Okay,
journey?
so let's real quick talk about that. So, in case you are reading along and you don't know, Azure or Vivenna,
Well, hold on. We didn't. That's not confirmed though, right? We know that Vasher is potentially Zyle. That's what it
Right.
seems like.
So,
But
you're
Go
not
ahead.
sure about Azure? Okay.
well, I have my. I'm assuming that it's Vivenna.
Okay.
But
So my little pitch to you guys, and if Dylan didn't have this spoiled, I would have done this pitch anyways. Is in Words of Radiance, which I'm pulling up right now to get a little quote. Sorry, I have like 3 books in front of me. In Words of Radiance, there is a scene with, or not Words of Radiance, it's in Oathbringer. Where Azure, Kaladin, Adolin, Shallan, they're all in Shadesmar, right?
Yeah.
And they wake up one morning, and I think Adolin wakes up and starts doing a kata or a katata or whatever it is,
Yeah.
which is kind of like Tai Chi or whatever for swordsmanship or whatever.
And Azure knows it.
And Azure wakes up
and
It's,
Azure
and
knows that.
sees,
it's specific to Zahal or Zalhil, yeah.
and Azure wakes up and sees that and starts doing it with him. And then Kaladin wakes up and starts doing it with him. And Shallan's like, "What are you guys doing? You have a bunch of idiots." And they're like, "Oh," and or Adolin's like, "Where'd you learn that from?" And she's like, "Oh, my swordmaster taught me." And he goes, "Oh, my swordmaster taught me too." Who was Adolin's swordmaster?
Zyle.
Right.
Yeah.
And
Well, then
So-
Azure straight up says, "Tell your swordmaster, I'm here for him, basically, or like I've got a grudge to settle with him, or
or
something."
no, she says, "Tell him I said," or it's like, "Tell him I'm looking for him," or something like that. I'm not quite sure, but
She's looking for the sword. She's looking for the sword.
right.
She says that.
One of the, and this is a Matthew theory, so we're all caught up at the same place on Stormlight, right? Like
Yeah.
we have all
Yeah.
gotten there. This is my Matthew theory, okay? My theory is Adolin is one of the best duelers in Roshar, right? Like
Yeah.
that's one of the entire plot lines of like Words of Radiance is him going through and challenging everyone and just wiping them out. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I think the reason why is because there's two reasons. One, because Zyle is his trainer, and 2, because Zyle comes from a different place. A different place has different ways of fighting. So it's hard to combat a style of fighting you've never seen before. You don't know how. You know what I'm saying?
But
Like
they all have this. They all have the same stances when they're
right, like
dueling.
there's the wind stances and stuff, but there's still different like things that you can. There's still different like flavor. Like if you cook a sandwich, there's many ways to cook a sandwich. And it's kind of
Yeah.
like that
Well,
the way I see
One
it.
thing that like jumps out to me is like when we see him fight Kaladin that first time. He reminds me of a lot of Vasher because he's really like tactical when he's fighting. Like he gets in close and like headbutts him, I think, or something. Like Kaladin's trying to fight him straight up, and he's like using what he's got around him and his body and shit to make it like really hard for Kaladin. Like it reminds me a lot of the way Vasher fights.
Right,
Yeah, he's like, "Damn the rules, I'm trying to win."
Yeah.
right. Let me pull up this interlude. So there is an interlude in Words of Radiance also that I wanted to read a little excerpt from. The interlude is called Zyle, and I think it's interlude 6. Hold on, I'm flipping. Where's it at? Okay. Sorry, Sanderson's books are massive. Page 393. Okay, I'm going. Okay. It's called Zyle, and this is the scene where Kaladin goes to Zyle and is like, "Hey, I need you to teach me how to use a shard blade. Like, I'm sorry I was wrong or whatever." And Zyle is like, "Fine, whatever, blah, blah, blah." And he said, so Kaladin leaves and says, "All right," the boy said, "I'll be back." "Good," Zyle said, settling down on the bed. "And don't be green from the ground." The boy paused by the door. "Don't be, huh?" Stupid language, Zyle thought, climbing into his cot. No proper metaphors at all. "Just leave your attitude and come to learn. I hate beating up younger kids than me. It makes me feel like a bully." The kid grunted, sliding the door shut. Zyle pulled up his blanket, damn monks only got one, and turned over on his cot. He expected a voice to speak in his mind as he drifted off. Of course, there wasn't one. Hadn't been one in years.
Yeah, okay, I do remember. I
Yeah,
do remember
yeah.
that.
So he's thinking about Nightblood there.
Right. And
Yep.
then he also gives a mention about a language involving colors that, these
Yep.
people on Roshar don't speak. And so that's kind of like the confirmation that Vasher is Xyle. Sanderson has also confirmed that that Vasher is probably the best swordsman in the Cosmere after the events of Warbreaker. Like, before, you could have made the argument for Denth, but Denth's gone now,
Yeah.
So you have the best training, the best, you know what I'm saying? So that's my stuff on Xyle.
Do we have any reason besides them wandering off together to believe that Azure is definitely Vivenna, though?
Didn't you say
Like,
her hair changed color?
Her hair
she
changed
does have
color.
the royal locks. She definitely has the royal locks.
But it could be Ciri.
But it could be Ciri. And she
Well,
has a shard blade, but it's like a foil with like a basket on it. Like it is a kind of a dueling saber, but it's not the one described in Warbreaker. And like, how did she
Yeah.
end up with a shard blade, but one that she can't dismiss? Is it like awakened like Vasher's is?
Or what if it's only like half awakened? Or what if they perfected the awakening? What if they perfected the awakening in the second book?
Yeah. Well, didn't he say he said that you could awaken steel without it becoming sentient?
That's true. You had to be at the ninth heightening, though. I think at one point she uses awakening too, doesn't she?
On the walls, yeah. She
On the
has
wall.
Yeah.
it doesn't say specifically, but before they start fighting, she wraps a piece of cloth around her hands. It doesn't say definitely that she awakened it and fought with it, but like the insinuation is there. Because Kaladin's like, "Oh, that's weird."
Yeah.
And then goes on and fights. And then she's talking about how they came to Roshar through Shadesmar with a guide, and I'm wondering if that was Hoyd, like if Hoyd brought them.
Oh yeah.
There's always a chance, because
from-
right now Hoyd is on that place with them.
Yeah, which I have so many questions about Hoyd. Like, so he's in everything, but it seems like he's been on Roshar for a very, very long time.
Well, there was an allusion to what he
Time
said.
is
He said
subjective too.
he said that he made a deal or whatever that he would always be where he needed to be,
Yeah.
but he doesn't
Well,
know why that is, or
yeah,
yeah.
Well, that's why I
Something
thought he
like
was
that.
God for the longest time. Because at one point they said something about how their God should be there when people needed him, and then he makes that comment of like, "I'm always where I need to be. I just don't know why I need to be there."
Right.
yeah. But so my thing
When
is
is-
like, does time move the same from world to world? Like, or if he's not in that world, is time paused for him there and he can like resume? Kind of like I know Dylan's right. I don't know if you Pendragon.
Oh,
Like,
yeah,
the way time is
yeah.
kind of
Bro, those
fucky.
books-
Dude, those
so
books
good.
hit.
Well, don't try rereading them. I tried it
Oh,
a few
yeah.
months ago.
No thanks.
It does not hold up well. YA
Really?
fantasy. Yeah. It real cringy stuff about Courtney, the 14-year-old girl.
Yeah.
Real weird stuff in there.
Well, when you're 14 reading it, it's probably not. As
Yeah, when you're
bad.
14 reading it, it's not bad until you look at the blurb and you're like, oh, this guy's 50.
Yeah. Well.
But no, the way that the flumes work, right, is like time is basically paused on that world until the traveler comes back there, unless like they need to arrive later, or sometimes if they need to arrive earlier, it's like kind of that's what it made me think of. It like, is time that way for Hoyd, where he shows up when and where he's needed?
Yeah. I don't. When does she call him Hoyd? Is it at the end of Words of Radiance when they're having their little conversation?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
I
When
must-
when she else calls out of Shadesmar, and he's waiting for her.
I must have missed that. I'm glad I finally know who he is though. Like I've been looking for him and everybody. And
Yeah,
like
I had to go Google it because I've read Mistborn, but it was way before I read
Right.
Stormlight. So I had to go look. I was like, hey, is Hoyd in these books? And yes, he is in all three of them
Um,
as like a minor character, but he's there.
he
right.
steals the show, bro.
Let me hold on a second. Y'all keep talking, but I have
I
something
think
about
I
Hoyt for
I
you.
think one of my favorite things about him though, I thought this when I thought he was God was he spends his time just standing around insulting people. So like when I thought he was God and I thought he just stood around to spend his time spending around insulting people, I was in love. I was like, I love this character.
Well, okay, so after Dawn Shard, do you guys think maybe he like has a Dawn Shard?
He's got well he gets a sprint there at the end, doesn't he?
Yeah,
Or
he gets the
it's a
sprint.
pattern.
And I think he says something about having like tried before to
Well, there
bond the
was
sprint.
also, if you remember in Words of Radiance, there's a scene, it's a Shallan flashback where Hoyd's at the festival with Shallan, and she peers into a bag that he's holding, and she sees something, and Hoyt snatches it away.
Yeah.
But that's kind of like the excerpt of that. Okay, I have something about Hoyt if you're ready.
Go for it.
This is gonna take some digging on your parts. I'm not gonna read it all because it's a lot. In each book in the Stormlight Archive, you know how there's those epigraphs at the beginning of the chapters, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
they're kind of random. You don't really know what they are. And they're different for each part. Like in part 1 of Way of Kings, it was the death rattles. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then at one point it's the gems in the library and
Right.
yeah.
I will recommend going through the Way of Kings again and just reading the epigraphs in order for part 2. Then the same thing for Words of Radiance in part 4. And the same thing again for Oathbringer in part 2.
You're saying those are all tied to Hoyd
Um,
in some way or another?
in some way or another.
Okay. Yeah,
So
then
what
I'll be
what
doing
is
that tonight.
does
then.
it reveal anything or
So the epigraphs are a letter of correspondence between two people. I'll let you read them and come to those conclusions yourselves.
Okay.
Okay.
Because it's not necessarily confirmed. But so it's part 2 of Way of Kings, part 4 of Words of Radiance, and part 2 of Oathbringer.
And it's the pre-forward or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, I've got that written down. All right. Well, so is there anything else?
I have.
Can we talk about the scene in Oathbringer where Seth is using Nightblood?
Oh yeah.
Holy shit! Talk about an anime battle when he just comes crashing down out of the sky, just gets a shows the fucking thunderclast down. I was like, this is the most insane thing I've ever read. This is crazy. Like he there has to be an anime scene of that
yeah.
exact thing.
Oh yeah. There's some dope artwork for it too, like some dope fan art around it, which is pretty sick. So here's my question. Nightblood, when he's drawn, right, he feeds off breaths. So how is Seth using him? I have a theory, but I want your guys's answer.
So Stormlight is still some form of breath, I feel like. Like it's not breath, but it's like
Well, it's investiture.
Yeah, investiture.
It's like,
yep.
Yeah, it's like the universal magic system. It's just like an individual like manifestation of the same like universal system.
I almost think of it as in a sense of like investiture is the raw form. And then like the different places have like varied forms of it, like slightly mutated or whatever, but investiture is just the raw form.
Right.
And so I have a theory if you want.
Yeah,
so,
go for it.
Nightblood sucks breaths / investiture, right?
mm-hmm.
Seth sucks Stormlight in order to like, Stormlight powers, his different various abilities or things like that. But Stormlight is kind of like, I think, is a raw form of investiture, because you have the Stormfather who literally comes in and is legitimate just investiture, like brings that through in his storms. And so I think that instead of breathing, or like instead of pulling from Seth whenever he's drawn, he's just pulling from Seth's Stormlight, and it just makes you think that, oh, Seth's just using this to do his lashings or whatever. And my theory for this also explains why Zyle Vasher is on Roshar, because he needs breaths to stay alive. Well, what better place to get breaths than the one that gives it away freely? Investiture. You know what I'm saying?
That does make some sense. I mean, we haven't seen him use Stormlight, but he totally could be behind the scenes.
Right. Well, I don't think he might be necessarily using it. I just think, the investiture itself.
He can't surge bind,
right,
because he doesn't have a Nile bond, but like he could still take it in, I guess.
Yeah. So that's just my theory, is that like the investiture is the raw form, and then there's the sub forms, but you can take the raw form in place. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's my theory.
That makes some sense.
But yeah. And then I have one final little connection that I made while reading this. So Ciri and Vivenna, whenever they grow out their hair, what happens to them?
They get hungry.
Okay. Does that remind you of anyone?
Oh, Lift. Okay, but I think Lift's deal is I think that's her curse. I think her curse is that, because it puts her half in, half out to stop her from aging or whatever. And then I think her curse is like she can only eat food that she steals, and so like that's why she's hungry, because instead of
well, she turns it into Stormlight though.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying though. Like, because I don't know. I kind of feel like that has something to do with her curse, because her hair doesn't do with anything.
Right.
She does stop aging though, so like it could be a breath deal.
Yeah. I think somehow they're correlated. I'm not sure how, but that's my theory, is that they're somehow correlated.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I hadn't drawn that connection. I kind of think Lift. I don't know. She breaks a lot of rules. Like turning food into Stormlight is kind of crazy, but I think that might just be because she's half in, half out of Shazemar. So like the Spren, they eat Stormlight.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's their sustenance. So it's almost like she's like half Spren, kind of.
Okay.
That could make sense.
And I have so many questions about Oathbringer that have nothing to do with Warbreaker, though.
Yeah. Well, if that's all of our Cosmere connections for Warbreaker 2, the Stormlight and stuff, we can go ahead and end our episode here.
Are there any connections that we've missed?
You said you had some stuff about Nightblood, but
just the thing with Seth and the Thunderclast. I thought that was insane, especially after like, well, okay, I read the Seth scene first, but when I read the scenes where Nightblood was like actually getting wielded, and then thinking back on Seth, it just made me think Seth was so much more of a badass.
Yeah.
Because I was just like, oh, this thing is like eating them alive, and they can barely control it, and like they're doing like pretty uninspired stuff with it, just slashing it around and turning shit to smoke, whereas Seth was like an anime pro tag in that battle.
Well, it shows stuff about Seth's character too, because he's not drawn
he's not tempted at all, but he's also not nauseous or anything.
Yeah,
right.
So he's like,
well, Vasher isn't either though, so maybe that comes with time.
It could have something to do with Seth's oath, like Seth's oath, he's tied to Dalinar now, right? And so, like, whatever Dalinar thinks is evil might be, the same as Seth. And Dalinar, I mean, you just saw the character work that went through Dalinar, so maybe it has something to do with that. I don't know. Speculation.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think it maybe is just the fact that they're, like, so egoless in a way. Like, Seth is like, I don't know. I don't trust myself. Like, I can't decide. I'm not superior to anyone. I'm beneath everyone. Like, I
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if that makes any sense, but yeah, I think it's a character thing because Vasher is also like, I'm worthless in a lot of ways, especially towards the end of the book where he's like, I don't know, I kind of started all this, like I deserve it, you know?
Yeah. Well, all right. I think that's gonna conclude our Cosmere connections for the series. This was a fun book.
Yep, it was good.
This was a really fun book. Especially, it got so much more fun
Yeah.
when I was reading Oathbringer and got to the part where Azure and Ziel are like kind of ousted as being from this world. It got so much more fun to like try to pin down who they were, and
Right.
so I think the fact that it connected to the overall universe was like really clever. And didn't you say he did this like right after Elantris?
So he
It was.
did.
I don't know if it was right after, but it was.
It
pretty
was.
close.
It was right before Way of Kings. So
Okay, so he
yeah.
did kind of have some
No idea.
idea what he was doing.
Yeah. I always
Either
like
way,
to think
crazy
it's a-
impressive how
Oh,
many
yeah.
tie-ins there are.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So I think we will go ahead and end the episode here. Again, if you haven't, share, like, subscribe, follow on your preferred platform. We appreciate all of the love and support that you guys have been showing on the podcast, and yeah,
Yep. We'll see y'all in Empire of the Vampire next month.
Excited for it.
see ya.
See ya.